Coaching is one of the significant stances that we as agile coaches display or exhibit during the transformation journey. And it's also something which is similar to transformation. Being a coach is a journey without destination. So you can never ever say that probably you are the perfect coach. That's at least something I strongly believe in. So being a coach is a great journey to practice our coaching competencies and skills that we look to continuously excel in. I'm Nivarthi Jairam, and in this video, we will be talking about the 10 books that I would strongly recommend for any agile coach looking to improve their coaching skills and competencies. So, let's get started. The first of the books that we look for is Coaching for Performance. Now, this is a foundational book on coaching. This is something which is written by Professor Sir John Whitmore, and this is looked at in coaching world. Primarily, this book is looked at as the kind of Bible to start off anybody's coaching journey on. In this book, I'll not talk about the whole book. Probably we can do book reviews on all of these at a later stage on the channel, looking at each of those books. But primarily, this book is what brought the coaching model, which we all talk about, the GROW model, into the world. Now, the GROW model, if you don't know, stands for G stands for goals, R stands for reality, O stands for opportunity, and W stands for willingness to pursue the goals that we are looking for. Primarily, this is the coaching model that any coach looks up to and builds their own coaching model during their journey of becoming a coach. Right. So, that is something which is very, very critical to really look for in this book. In this book, also, the author talks about the human learning cycle, the four stages of human learning. He talks about the four stages. The first stage is unconscious incompetence, the journey of any human being from being unconscious incompetence to unconscious competence, how you go through that learning journey. So you start from unconscious incompetence, move to unconscious conscious incompetence, rather than from conscious incompetence you move to conscious competence, and conscious competence to unconscious competence, which essentially means when you are starting at unconscious incompetence means you probably even don't know what you don't know, right? So that's something where you start, and the moment you start learning about that particular topic which you never thought existed, you move yourself from unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence, right? And as you start practicing and probably building your competency around that, you move from conscious incompetence to conscious competence. And when that particular competence or skill becomes a habit for you, that you don't need to really focus on performing that job or that exhibiting that behavior or that skill set, then you really are in the unconscious competence state. Those are the four stages of learning that the author talks about. So great book overall to start off if you are freshly starting focusing on your coaching journey of being a professional coach. Professional coaching is one of the significant elements, and now we are seeing this quite a bit in the market, that the agile coaches are also trying to expand their skill sets and become more of professional coaches as well, while they are improving their skill sets on practitioners or being agile practitioners. So that is our first book to start off on. Now let's look at the second book. Now when you are coaching actually, or whenever you are coaching, there are two elements that you look for. And whenever a coaching conversation starts, and I had published a coaching process earlier in one of my videos specifically, if you haven't seen that yet, I would start recommending you to look at that video as well. Right? So when you start coaching people, usually the coachee or the client, however you want to refer to them, as they start with what problem they are facing, right? But the responsibility of a coach, or what does a coach do, is move them from focusing on what the problem is to the underlying element of who they are, because we strongly believe as coaches who we are drives what we do, in the sense that whatever our beliefs, our values, our core aspirations, assumptions, all those elements which are pretty much integrated into our personality and character drive our behaviors. And when someone says I have X problem, there is always an underlying belief or an assumption or a value, or the way they have been brought up, the culture that they have imbibed, could be the reason driving that particular problem or an issue, or anything to do with their aspirations, right? So those elements are what you need to coach people on. So this is a second book that I am recommending, and it's a great book for any coach to read, written by Marcia Reynolds. She is one of the master coaches from ICF, and the book is Coach the Person, Not the Problem. How do you look to move a person when you are having that coaching conversation from the what to the who? That is what this book talks about. Great book to read. And what I have done is, many times we do get into a question of same titles for the books and being confused which book to pick. So what I've done is I've tried to put a QR code on the images itself, so you can scan the QR code and straight away go to that book. If you are watching from outside of India, you may end up landing on Amazon.in, but always you can look up to in your respective Amazon sites with that title and author specifically, that comes up. So that's something which I've made it easy for you. Now, this is the second book, Coach the Person, Not the Problem, by Marcia Reynolds. Because whenever you coach the person and you are trying to help them understand what needs to change with them from who they are, that creates a lasting change. It may take longer than changing just what we are doing, but it creates a transformation effect. Otherwise, you are just helping the person transition to a different state, but whenever they are faced with a similar problem or some other problem, they wouldn't really understand, or that change would not last. It is just contextual change than a behavioral change or a personality change. So when we are talking about coaching a person, you are coaching them for change, right? That is very critical. So this book talks specifically about that particular point. Move on to the next book. Whenever, as I mentioned, whenever we are coaching our coaches or on clients, or even our journey of being a coach, we all build habits throughout, from the time we really are sensible about what is happening around ourselves and probably who we are. Unconsciously, consciously, we start building our habits. And once those habits are strong enough, they move from conscious habits to unconscious, right? And when they become unconscious, it becomes very difficult to really know that you are doing something which probably you're not intending to do, right? And for that to happen, then you need to understand how to really get that consciousness or awareness of what habits you are exhibiting, right? So from that point of view, The Power of Habit is again a great book to read, understand how habits are formed, how they move from conscious to unconscious, and then if you have to change your habits, how do you do them? The author talks a great deal about the habit loop in this particular book, right? Look at the habit loop. How do you develop habits? And if you have to change, how do you need to change that routine that you are so used to, right? So when you talk about again neuroscience, as we keep doing an activity time and time again, there is a neural network connection that gets formed, right? The more times you repeat that activity, the connection becomes stronger and stronger, right? So that means it starts becoming unconscious. You won't even realize that you are displaying that behavior or you have that habit in you, right? So that is the strength of habits. So it's very important, if you want to change or if we want to change certain habits, we need to move them from unconscious state to conscious state, right? That is very critical. So that understanding of how habits are formed and how habits can be changed, you will get it from this particular book. A fourth book that I'm looking at is Triggers by Marshall Goldsmith. Marshall Goldsmith, if you don't know yet, you should know if you are getting into coaching world. He is the number one executive coach for many years, right? So, and he has written lot many books, and this is one of the great books that came out of his thought leadership. So in Triggers, as you notice from the title, it talks about our environment influences many times how we respond, right, and how we showcase ourselves. So our behaviors are also influenced externally by the environment while they are influenced by our own self, right? So a bit complicated if I tell you that it's about how we perceive the environment and how the environment perceives us, and then how we perceive that perception, right? How do we understand in the way the environment or people around us are treating us, and then how do we look to respond to that, right? So it's about a great higher state of emotional intelligence. So in this book, Marshall Goldsmith talks about the triggers that can influence our behaviors from an environment perspective, and how do we need to really look for that so that we create a lasting change again, right? So again, that can be unconscious as well, or that can be conscious as well. So that is another good book to read in terms of how to look for those triggers, and then how do you look to manage ourselves in those situations so that we respond differently when we are facing with a similar situation or a different situation. So this book is about how to create a lasting change, and great book to read. Again, one of the tough books that came from Marshall Goldsmith. That's number four. And as I said, these are not ranked that way, so it's just the recommendation that I have. So don't go by thinking that okay, this is the number one book or this is the number two. I'm not talking about top 10 ratings. I'm talking about 10 books that we all should read if we are pursuing the journey of a coach. At number five again is on power of now. One of the, or I would say the most important competence for anyone to be a coach is to develop presence. That means the ability to be in the now. What we all know and probably understand is that in the whole life that we have or every day that we go through, almost 80 to 85% of our time is spent on reflecting on the past. What have I done? What did I do? How did I think? And everything about the past. And probably 10 to 12% about our future, what would I do? So what we are left is probably the 2 to 3% when you are actually in the present, being in the now at that moment, right? So it is very, very important to improve that level of presence, especially whenever you are in a conversation or in everything you do. Give your maximum attention to that particular activity or conversation or the situation that is at hand. So how to improve your presence, right? This book talks a great deal about importance of being in the presence. If you have good amount of presence, you can build all your other competencies that we talk about. So if you go to the description below, I will put down a link to the coaching competencies from ICF, which you can always look up to. But all other competencies that we showcase or we build, or we ingrain or integrate into ourselves as coaches, stems from how much presence we have, right? It influences our state of listening. It influences our ability to understand the state of the client and ask the right questions. It influences our ability to communicate with the client. So everything that we do in a coaching conversation, or even in other regular life conversation, stems from how present we are in that particular conversation, right? That is very critical. So this book really talks about the power of being in the present. Another great book to read if you are really keen on enhancing your competency levels of being a coach. So if you are really getting value, I would request you all to hit the subscribe button and like this video, so that we you continue to get notification of the future videos that we publish. Now, the next book I'm going to talk about is about emotional agility by Susan David. Again, you all would have heard about Emotional Intelligence, the book by Daniel Goleman, right? So that's a great book to read. What also is important is how emotionally agile we are or we need to be. So it is about our state of mind. How do you manage our emotions so that you are in the present, irrespective of the environment? Yes, we would be influenced by what is happening around us. We would be influenced by how people treat us. We would be influenced by how we feel about all that, right? What is happening in the world around us. But how do we manage? How do we build that resilience, the courage to come back to our best version of ourselves, right? Our true authentic self in that state. That is about emotional agility. Great book to read again, and on building our emotional agility, and try to really be ourselves irrespective of what the environment or what the situation has to throw at us, right? So again, journey of being a coach is being emotionally agile. Many times in a conversation, and this happens a lot with me, that when you are empathizing, and we all need to have empathy, right? So when you are in that conversation, and it is a strong conversation, that when I say strong conversation, when the client is exhibiting lots of strong emotions, many times it happens that I am drawn into that emotion myself. Then if I'm not emotionally agile, if I'm not recognizing that I'm drawn into that emotion, then how do I look to get myself out of that emotion and be present in that conversation to make it impactful for the coachee or the client, right? That's again very important, because that influences our ability to be present in the conversation. If not, you are drawn by that emotion and you lose your presence. And the moment you lose your presence, we lose our listening. If you lose your listening, you lose your questioning and communication and the ability to really create that impact to the client. So That is again a great book to read and practice. When I say read all these books, it's also important to understand what the authors are suggesting or bringing focus on, and try to really practice what they are looking for us, right, what they are advocating us. So that is the next book which we are talking about, emotional agility. Next book we look at is active listening techniques. Now, as I mentioned, presence is one definite competence, right? But to build on that presence, you need active listening skills, listening to what is being spoken and what is not being spoken at different levels, right, of a person. So what is spoken is you understand the words that are being spoken, right? Now what is not being spoken, the intent behind those words. When somebody is using some metaphors, why they are using those metaphors? Are you really focused on capturing those metaphors? Are you looking at their body language? Are you looking at their energy, their tone, their expressions, right? All their emotions. So all those elements, what are not being spoken, but that conveys a lot more than what is being spoken. So active listening is again about our ability to be present to the person completely, so that you can listen to what is being said and what is not being said, more importantly, right? That is, this book talks about practical tools and techniques that we can use really to improve our skills of listening, correct? That is the book. Next, empathy, right? I told you about this. If we can't really practice empathy, then it becomes very difficult to connect with the coachee or the client at a personal level, right, at a whole level. And if you are not able to do that, then you can't build trust, and the whole coaching relationship is built on that trust. So it's important to really understand and practice empathy, right? There is a difference between sympathy and empathy. So when you talk about empathy being, or the ability to really understand and feel the feelings of the client, right, being able to put ourselves in their shoes, is what we normally refer that to as. So this book by Carla McLaren again is one of the very great books on the art of empathy. So it talks about what empathy is, how you really can develop empathy. And again, this all of these are kind of journeys that we undertake. There is no limit to that. So how much ever you can practice, you keep enhancing, and the more you enhance your awareness, the state of presence to yourself, the more stronger limitations we come across, or stronger challenges we encounter for ourselves, and that puts that much you know uh, emphasis on the effort really required to overcome those challenges. So that's why I say this is a continuous journey of being a coach, just like the journey of being on that transformation. Now, we talked about presence, we talked about listening, we talked about empathy. And now, if you have all these, the one of the great things that you need as a coach is to ask the right questions in that context. So, are you looking to explore? Are you looking to, help the client dig deeper? What are you trying to help the client with, right, in that particular partnering conversation that you have at that point of time? Ask More is a great book. It talks about varieties of questions that we can ask, and what the intent of those questions should be or could be, and how to really get into that flow of that conversation and bring up those questions. Very good book to read if you are really looking to develop the art of questioning, right? So our ability to create that sense of awareness, or the aha moment that we talk about in coaching conversations for the client, we all need that ability to ask the right impactful questions. And impactful questions need not be 10 minutes long or a 3-minute long question. It can be a simple question like what else. So again, it depends on what the context is and how you frame your questions within that context of client's conversation, right? So that is very critical, and this book really nails it down on different types of questions and how do you flow those questions into the conversation. Great book to read. I really love this book as well. Now, before I get to the last book, this is a disclaimer. I couldn't stop myself from putting this book, along with all these great books by great authors. And this book is something which I'm really passionate about, and that's why I wrote this book. The last book we are going to look at is Unlearning, because the journey of being a coach is more about unlearning than learning. It's, if you ask me, it's about going back to being a child again. Can you remember when you are a child or when you have last interacted with a child? They don't really think about what questions they are asking. Their intent is to ask questions. They are curious. They don't have any inhibitions. They don't carry any baggage about the world. What would people feel? What would people think? Right. So they don't really think about all those things. They just are curious. Can you be curious to everything that the client is putting forward to? That is very important. And this book I really wrote about my experience of having gone through the unlearning journey. And in this book I really talk about, in the first book when I was talking about Professor Sir John Whitmore's book on coaching for performance, I talked about the human learning stages, right? So you talk about moving from unconscious incompetence to unconscious competence. But if you really want to unlearn a lot of things that we have built into ourselves throughout our lives that we have undergone, then when you want to be a coach, it's about letting go of many of those things, right? So letting go of our inhibitions, letting go of our judgment, letting go of our biases. So it's more about unlearning. So how do you let go, right? The unlearning stages are reverse. Then first is you have that as your unconscious competence. How do you move it from unconscious competence to conscious competence, right? And then from conscious competent to conscious incompetence. And then probably my experience so far has been that you will never be able to completely forget what you had, right? So it may be very remotely at the back of your brain, but it would still remain. But if you are really able to move to unconscious incompetence, that you don't even remember that you had something like that with you, that's absolutely wonderful. You could be one amongst the exceptions. But most of the time it's about moving at least from unconscious competence to conscious incompetence. That means intentionally forgetting that, not trying to bring that in your coaching conversations, whether those behaviors or whatever we are looking at. So those are the 10 books I really wanted to talk about in this video. And there could be other books also, but these are some books that I have read through, I really loved, and they have helped me a lot in my journey of being a coach, which continues. It's not like it has I've reached that magic state. No, the journey continues. But I thought it would be great to share this with the community, because I'm seeing a lot of agile coaches now embarking on the journey of being in that professional coaching as well. So I hope you found value with this video. If you really like what you are seeing, please subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and of course, more importantly, share this with your own community network. Thank you all for watching again. We'll soon come back with future videos on what books to read for an enterprise agile coach. That is something I would look to publish next. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to put them in the comments below. Again, if you want me to specifically focus on any topic that could interest you, put them in comments as well, and we'll try to see if I can do something or I need to get an expert who can really talk about that topic. Thank you all for watching. Keep looking for more videos. Thank you.